Okay, so we're here today with Lindsay Yeo. Lindsay, thank you so much for speaking with us. Just to start, could you tell us a bit about your epilepsy? So when you had your first seizure, when you were first diagnosed, and then maybe the type and frequency of your seizures?
Okay, so my seizures started back when I was a baby. I had a febrile convulsion that lasted 20 minutes when I was 8 months old. So I think that was kind of the beginning. I'd been on medication until I was about 4. Then I was seizure-free for about 8 years or so. And then from there, I had started having tonic-clonic seizures about 9 or 10 years old. And from there, they just sort of continued and changed a little bit to include not just tonic-clonic, but the smaller versions of epilepsy, and so, or of seizures. And so I would just kind of shift from different ones, and they'd get the tonic-clonic or grandma, whatever you want to call them, under control, and then it would be smaller seizures, and that kind of continued throughout my life, even with medication. So.
Okay. And then can you talk about what your treatment journey has been like? So the different medications you tried, and then at what point you were referred to specialists?
So I went back on the same medication that I had been on as a baby to start when they came back in my early teens or in my whatever, that kind of age, that 10 or 11 age. And from there, they helped, but it didn't help entirely. So because of that, I think we tried probably a good handful of medications. I probably can't even remember all the ones. Was always kind of on a mix of 2 or 3, or at least 2. Eventually, late teens, I think, was when I got connected to Sick Kids, and that's where I first explored the testing for surgery. It was long, it was not fun, and I wasn't a candidate at that time, so I sort of just continued on switching medications through my 20s. Again, attempted to look into surgery as an option that was kind of supported by those surrounding me in my late 20s. Wasn't 100% an opportunity at that time, and I wasn't really ready to test a lot more about it. So I then kind of moved on, continued still having seizures, different medications, those kinds of things. And by the time I hit my late 30s, switching some neurologists and things like that, I had then had it had been suggested that I look into surgery again. My age and things like that made a difference. I looked into it through Toronto Western, and that's when it was an option and easier to spot, I think, than what they had discovered before in all the times before.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. And then can you tell us about what type of surgery you had?
So I had removal of my left temporal lobe, I think with the hippocampus as well, and that was done just November of last year.
Okay, and do you continue to have seizures?
So far, so good. So I'm almost 7 months and seizure-free, which is good.
Wonderful.
Good and weird.
I bet. Okay, so can you describe the feelings that you had when you were considering surgery as a treatment option? So some of the factors that factored into your decision?
So the third time around, for sure, I think was the most difficult of all of the ones before. Mostly because having gotten involved with epilepsy-related areas, being a volunteer, working on other projects, I had started and meeting so many people. I'd learned so much more about surgery and the different outcomes and the ups and downs and support groups, things like that. It all had me kind of with a lot to think about going through that. And it was an unexpected. I really had gone into the testing thinking that they were going to come back and tell me no for the third time, and then I'd be able to say like 3 strikes, it's out. And I wouldn't worry about it going forward. So it really threw me for a loop when they came back with a yes, and a very convincing yes. So that whole process was challenging for me. One of my biggest fears was actually trying to figure out if I still belonged in my support groups, because if I was seizure-free, was I still, did I still fit that community and that that really kind of threw me, because I think growing up and living with epilepsy and just learning how to put my life to take that in and kind of live with it, and just kind of, it is what it is, over a lot of years. I sort of just, that was going to be a big change. So.
Okay, and then, so you've mentioned that staying in the epilepsy monitoring unit was not fun. Can you talk a bit more about that experience, what it was like physically and emotionally to go through both the assessment and the surgery itself?
The assessment was, it was good. Like, the staff here is phenomenal, and I had a lot of great help there. And but I also was stressed because I was trying to still work on a project and I needed to call in for some stuff. It was playoff season, so I was like all stressed out that I wasn't going to get everything I wanted to watch, all the games. Luckily, between a computer and the TV in the hospital, I was able to watch stuff, but I sort of was still trying to enjoy my life, even though I was sitting in the hospital, and you're kind of stuck in bed. You can't really go off camera, you can't, so you do have to stick fairly low key, and and seizures, I always have found, are harder to happen when you're in the hospital, because I think because you are not busy and moving around and kind of living your day-to-day life. I've, in so many conversations, it's kind of been said that it just feels like it takes away almost the stress and stuff that can lead to your seizures. But then going through as well the testing and all of that, and then going through the surgery itself. Always, people here have been phenomenal in getting us through that, and I was very lucky that I had family and friends that came by. Surgery is tiring. It's exhausting, and usually you can't wait to go home. So luckily I was only here for about 4 days
after your surgery. Okay.
Before I got to at least go home to my parents and have them take care of me.
Wonderful. Okay, and what was the recovery process like for you?
Recovery was, it definitely had ups and downs. There were some things that happened that I didn't expect. There were definitely things that they had said ahead of time, coming up with words. So definitely I go through phases. It started with players' names or team names when I first had my surgery, and has kind of gone on to other things, but where I can totally think of who I'm talking about or what I'm talking about, but the word is just stuck, as Dr. Valiente always said to me, it's on the tip of your tongue, and it's just there, and you sort of have to just keep going, and then it comes to you. So that's been a bit frustrating to work through. I also found probably within the first, I mean, the typical pain and headaches and stuff that they tell you, those were there for 2 weeks and not fun. And then I think I went through about 2 weeks after that where I actually had dreams of having seizures, and wondered if I had, and then I would wake up and wonder if I'd had seizures, and I'd never really dreamed about seizures before. So I don't know if it was just that it was in my head, and that was there. So that was a little bit weird for me. Then I kind of moved on after 2 weeks, and it became another 2 weeks of kind of weird things that didn't really make sense. I always forget. There's always, like, I go through the 3 things and I always forget one of them. And the last one was another kind of 2 weeks of things that really made no sense for me. I would just cry for no reason. I'd have to call my mom to ask her how yesterday was, and then cry for no reason, and then but we'd laugh. But it was just that kind, because I knew it was nothing. It just was happening, and then it just sort of was this 2 week thing for me.
Okay. And which part would you say was the most difficult part about your recovery? I think it was all a lot harder than I expected. I really kind of expected it to be something I would just walk through. I just feel like I've kind of accepted challenges and moved through them, and I sort of have had this idea of being a positive and optimistic thinker on so many things, that this time I was thinking really positively, and
I think too, it was winter when I went through it, so I don't know if that was more challenging. It was super cold, so the idea of getting out and walking was not enjoyable. Getting out to run errands, going in the underground where it was crowded with people, it's a little kind of freaky. And so there were things that I wasn't ready for. Even seeing friends took a while before I was really ready to kind of get back to that, which is not like me. So.
Okay, wonderful. And then, so you are seizure-free. Other than the obvious, what has been the biggest change in your daily life?
I think even now, just over 6 months, I still find being tired a common thing, and that's, again, not typically like me before. So being back to work, right now I'm only taking on part-time, and that's good because I know that that's really all I can handle. So I'm okay with that. And luckily, I'm with a team that is okay with that, so it works well. So I think that's been hard. I think also still sometimes connecting with friends, I just feel like it takes energy, and sometimes I don't have that. I do, what I find beneficial from it is that it's helping me learn to pick and choose so that I'm not in over my head. I used to do that a lot, where I would just commit to everything that was thrown my way, and I think this time around I'm really learning that, I can't always say yes, and if I can only do half a workout, I can only do half a workout.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
That's
knowing your limits.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And what would you say has been the biggest surprise about your recovery or your surgery?
I think the fact that I'm still seizure-free is probably my biggest surprise.
So a good surprise.
It's good. I really just didn't expect that. Even though they said that, I don't know.
Did they give you a good chance of being seizure-free?
Yes, I was given about an 80 or 85% chance, but at the end of the day, I lived with it for my life, so it sort of never seems like it was really going to be possible. And still, you never know, but I'm grateful for what I have, so.
Wonderful. And is there anything you wish you had known before your surgery? You mentioned parts of the recovery. Would that be the main thing?
Some of the recovery, I think, it would have been great to hear more stories about what people went through with surgery, and I know that everybody goes through different things. Even since surgery, I've heard some other stories and heard some people who are, back up and going within 8 weeks or something. And, I've heard different things, and I've heard people who've had even bigger challenges. So I understand that, but I think maybe more specific to what I was going through myself, that definitely would have been more helpful. Or having a place that I knew I could definitely read about that. Just some of those things would have been more beneficial for me. I know I was so busy even in the decision making last year time that I probably didn't spend enough time going through some of my counseling with my decision making. I was kind of trying to go through crazy work times and make a decision all in one go. So some of those things I think are the harder parts.
Okay, wonderful. And then final question, if you could turn back the hands of time, is there anything about your treatment pathway or your surgery you wish had been done differently?
I think I wish I had just known sooner in life that it was okay to ask for help and to make things like going to a support group, a monthly thing, like a definite thing, or however often they meet. Eventually that sort of became something that me and my overworking years and time, I actually had to put that in as a definite on my calendar to make sure that I was made the time for that. And so in that process, I learned and heard other stories, and it kept me a little more open-minded. So I kind of wish I'd done that maybe in my 20s versus waiting until my 30s, but I also think that things happen for a reason. So, and maybe I would have been with another team that I didn't like as much or something. So I just think everything
just fall into place.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So any other things you'd like to share, or any final words of wisdom maybe for people who are considering having surgery?
I think something that I also really learned with this process is having been through the testing for surgery 3 different times in my life, and thinking that what they told me the first time was always going to be the answer, and then learning that it's completely not 20 years later. I think that really teaches me, and hopefully can help teach other people, that just because they told you no once doesn't mean that things don't change. Things are moving forward, technology and how brilliant people are as they go through school and learning and all of this stuff, that there are people there that can help you that you don't know. And so it's sort of something to maybe always keep in the back of your mind as an option if it's of interest, and also just to stay open-minded. I wasn't for a long time, and I think it was beneficial when I went back to being open-minded. So
great advice in general.
Exactly.
Okay. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story with us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.